Welcome to the Phame Influence Podcast, bringing you the heavy hitters in marketing, influence, music, and entertainment industries. With your host entrepreneurs, Till Paris and Kevin Puckett.
Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of the Phame Influence Podcast. My name is Till Paris.
And I'm Kevin Puckett. We're joined here with our co-host, Palmer Davidson.
That's me, and I'm excited to be here.
And we are your hosts of the show today. Let's start with a quick word from our sponsor. Palmer?
I'm not the sponsor. Oh, got it. Sorry. Our show is proudly sponsored by MauiCoffeeCo.com, which features a rich tasting coffee that is grown in volcanic soil, and you can taste it in the beans at the base of the West Maui Mountains. As an exclusive benefit to our listeners, head on over to MauiCoffeeCo.com and receive 15% off your order by using coupon code FAME15. That's PHAME15 for 15% off your order at MauiCoffeeCo.com.
All right. Thank you so much, Palmer, and thank you, Maui Coffee. All right, our next guest is Chief Marketing Officer at Lionbridge. He's responsible for leading global product development and marketing efforts, including strategy, brand, content, demand generation, digital, and product marketing. He earned a Bachelor of Arts in History and Political Science from Stanford. He's a recognized leader in brand strategy, innovation, and digital experiences, having most recently served as the head of brand strategy and digital marketing at TIAA, a top financial services company where he led the relaunch of its brand. In his prior role as global head of content and digital distribution at Thomson Reuters, he designed and built a suite of products and services powering more than 1,000 financial firms, media partners, portals, and apps. He previously served as Citibank's NA head of digital innovation, where he led Citi's industry-leading mobile, social, and next-generation digital efforts. Please welcome to the Phame Influence Podcast, Jaime Punishill. So, Jaime, our listeners heard a little bit about what you do, but tell us why it's influential.
Yeah, so I think I'll answer that on two fronts. Lionbridge is a fascinating company that really has two businesses in it, both of which are super important for our lives every day, but they're like hidden. We're like the coating on a muffler. You think about just the last 6 or 7 months in the pandemic. Everyone's now grocery shopping online, buying everything online in a way that was, lots of folks have been saying for years was going to happen, but has been profound. 90% of the content on the web, though, is in English. And I don't have to tell you that the 7 billion people do not all speak English or speak it well or speak it as a primary language. So if you're operating today, even as a small business, you throw a website up, you're global by default. You're talking to 7 billion people. And it's really complex to figure out how do you get that content in English? How do you, or out of your source language, your SEO, your chat bots, your customer support. This is a very complex thing, which is why lots of folks don't do it. And we're one of the key enablers for that. Most people also don't know that we're one of the largest providers of training data for AI. So any algorithm you can think of needs super high quality data, and there's a lot of humans that have to be in the loop. And we've got a 1 million person crowd, every country, every language, every capability, and all the top AI companies, all the algorithms that you use every day, whether you know it or not, somewhere in there are Lionbridge paw prints, helping make those things work. So from a corporate perspective, we're literally sitting in the lives of most consumers on a daily basis. They just have no idea that we've helped bring them whatever it is that they're using.
That's really fascinating. So not only is it incredibly complex, though, I would assume that that's an incredibly expensive endeavor. And I say that because obviously Phame develops a lot of websites for the clients that we use. And, that's actually how I got my start in the industry, was with SEO and SEM. So I'm very familiar with this. And even the statistics that you just said about English, I mean, it's just amazing at this point. So talk to me about, why that's so important, even though, let's say there's 7 billion people in the world. Okay. Obviously not all 7 billion people are on the internet, but as we become more of this global economy, and then you see things like COVID rapidly speed this up, what would you tell a company that's on the debate, on the fence about this, of enduring that expense or prioritizing that expense and making that investment?
It is incredibly complex, and to your point, when done not well, can be very expensive. I think there's even a meta issue up above, which is you have to start with this view that the globe is your customer base, and most people operate, still operate very geographically and locale wise, and that's the problem. If you operate as a multinational in your thinking, and you say, hey, I started here in New York, and then I'm going to expand to Massachusetts, and I'm going to expand to the rest of the United States, and then, maybe I'll go to Canada then, or something like that. You end up with this very regionalized view that leads you to set your system. It's like you're going to build a skyscraper, but try to do it on the foundation of a 2-story house. Because when you think about the globe, a multilingual website as a good example, the whole way you set your data schema up is different. So here's a great example. We just replatformed our entire digital experience. We moved over to Adobe. Out of the box, Adobe does not have a multilingual data schema, which meant we couldn't tag all of our content right in order for it to easily and inexpensively be translated and localized into 10 languages, which is what we do for our customers. We do it in 10 languages. So we had to build with our partner a proprietary multilingual data schema. Now, imagine you're Microsoft or you're Google or Amazon or insert name here, and you've got a global audience. How do you effectively do that? And this is a profound impact on your business, right? One of the major e-commerce players that we work with would tell you that when they translate or localize their product descriptions and their pricing, there's a 37% increase in sales in that market.
Jesus.
And that's right. So that's a lot of money left on the table. So everybody focuses on the cost of it. But I think if I told you I could raise your sales by 37% market by market, that cost feels a little bit different.
Well, not only entirely different, but I mean, you've already got huge conglomerates that spend millions, if not billions, over the course of a decade trying to improve the speed of their website, because that's been directly correlated with a 1% increase in sales, let alone something as drastic as you just said. I mean, 37%. If you can't justify the cost off of that, it's almost looking at everything as an expense rather than growth. People do it all the time with marketing. They see it as an expense rather than an investment. And that type of mentality is the reason that you're seeing a lot of these giants that sit on piles and piles of corporate cash and were able to be lethargic for so many years, just losing to companies that are willing to innovate in those spaces and see those things more as investments rather than expenses.
Jaime, that's really interesting. System and processes are like the marrow of moving forward in this instance. And I really like how you articulated that regional or that micro mindset, and how that's such a sticking point where you're trying to solve these issues and solve problems, and thinking more globally opens up the palette so you can accept more of these challenges to solve, where in instance you're just undermining your own business and your own processes. So, I mean, with your own advertising channels, I mean, what do you find most effective for your business, and what have you done to calibrate its effectiveness?
Yeah. So we've really torn our marketing organization down to the studs and rebuilt it over the last couple of years. Whole new tech stack, whole new team. It's been brutal, but it's been, it's fun because then you're dealing with all the latest stuff and the right process and what have you. And we spent a good chunk of last year literally just testing. Okay, let's see how do we perform on Google? How do we perform on LinkedIn? Does direct mail work? Do physical events work? And the whole year was just one big set of tests. So as we came into this year, I think we had a really good sense of our customer journey and our buying process, and it's very complex. It's a big B2B enterprise. But we made the conclusion we really needed to lead into an account-based motion, and really bring the sales and the marketing team super, super close. And we had a theory that, we really had a much stronger digital buying cycle that as a company we weren't taking advantage of. And so we were really lining up for that. And then COVID hit, and COVID took all the other toys away. So it's a really fascinating thing as a marketer now. Like, everything went away. Trade shows are gone. Direct mail is kind of squishy because you don't know where you're mailing. And we just happened to really lean into the digital marketing engine, super, super timely and smart. And so we've been killing it. LinkedIn has been our most effective channel because it's super targeted. I can hit you by title and by company and by role. So what it allows me to hit you with very, very relevant and personalized messaging. And now we're expanding that across, many, advertising channels. But the key there is all about really understanding the buyer and matching the matching the messaging, and none of which is like super profound, but it just staggers me how much marketing is just done blindly in shotgun.
Yeah. We have this saying that goes on the top of all of our proposals, the very few that we do now. But it's like, marketing without data is like driving with your eyes closed. And I think that's so true in the points that you're mentioning. And in specific, I'd love to talk a little bit more about your guys' LinkedIn strategy. So for us, a lot of our B2B businesses that we represent, this has been a huge focus of ours over the last year and a half. And fortunately, like you, Phame Influence is an exclusive digital marketing company. We don't do anything in the traditional world. So being the guys that have been on our soapbox for years now, serendipitously enough, when COVID hit, all of a sudden we look like geniuses because everything that you just mentioned closed down. But was that something that serendipitously happened for you, or was that strategic to try digital marketing? And it had COVID not have happened, would you still be looking to explore some of those other areas?
Yeah, so no, it was a very strategic and conscious choice. So a little bit of my background, I've been doing digital transformation projects and that kind of stuff since the mid 90s. I will avoid the age question there. And for anybody who's been doing it for a while, you're frustrated because it's so obvious and so clear. This is the future. This is what you want to do. It's so much better from a measurability perspective, et cetera, et cetera. But, and I've spent much of my career trying to advance the digital channel set and the digital experience through various corporations. So that teed me up very nicely for, as I came into this job. It was really super clear that the company, prior to my team's arrival, was really living in almost an offline world, and in a really old sales cycle. So a lot of the transformation I talked about was predicated on this idea that lots of people don't know about what localization is, right? Yeah. Or about what AI training data, these things that I've talked about. So first we have to educate, we've got to get that content out there, we've got to drive everybody back. And there's no real hub for knowledge in our industry. So that's an advantage that we have, because if we can syndicate and we can get in front of folks, we believe we can draw them back into our own story and case studies and examples and things of that nature. So we laid that foundation really 2 years ago now. We led a rebrand. That was the first thing we did was rebrand the company. And part of that was to lay a strategy out and sort of a North Star. And so we spent the last 2 years sort of building for that. So the answer is it's both unbelievably serendipitous and strategic all at the same time, because we were set on that path. But as we really started to scale, because you sort of had to build, then you got to operationalize, then you scale. We were really in scaling phase for this year. Everything else got taken off the table. And so as we started to pour money into it, it's been incredibly effective. And without, there's no resistance, because it's not like, oh no, don't put money over there, please put money over here. It's, wow, can we put more money over here? Because look at the lead flow, look at the pipeline.
Well, and also all the other channels are dead, right? So it's like it takes the guessing work out of it, and then it's more about you're being strategic inside of a hermetically sealed bubble, right? Like, there's about 9 facets of digital marketing, and the question then becomes, where should we move more of those dollars inside a hermetically sealed bubble, instead of also saying, okay, well, you've got this silo, this silo, this silo, where should my money get? And then trying to be strategic in one of those silos. So that's really interesting.
That's right. And to your point, I'll just finish with this, because I think what COVID has exposed, I'm fascinated. I'm on probably some CMO roundtable or something like that about once a week, because I'm always trying to learn. And in COVID, there's so many of them. I'm amazed at how many people are just frozen. And I think it's because much of what we've seen the last 10 or 15 years is what I like to call digital kabuki theater. They pretended to be doing digital, but they didn't really think about what that meant strategically, process-wise. They didn't change the talent. They didn't really change the tech. And what happened is you just immediately exposed.
you actually don't really have an SEO strategy, or it turns out your content's not that good, or what have you. And they were just hiding because behind all the other channels of activity that were still producing pipe. And now you can't hide.
Yeah, you can't hide. And I love that, Jaime. It's that marketing theater. And you do see this a lot out there. You know, there's a lot of even CMOs. I mean, you're speaking our language. We're talking brand story. We're talking, A/B testing. We're talking knowing your customer. I mean, this is at the core of where marketing. I mean, customer is number one, and understanding that relationship and seeking that relationship, going after it. I mean, rather than just a posting strategy. I mean, what is your customer or social media strategy? How are you interacting or interjecting with your customers and learning their wants and needs and actually listening? Where I think a lot of brands just sit out and push the message, and you're right, they hide behind that because I think they're frozen. They don't know what to do. And when you add something like COVID in the mix, now you're sitting in a situation where you're forced to make a decision. You're forced to have to rise, and it's a tall order. And we're watching everything. We're at the precipice of things just falling off and moving forward. And we're seeing those who can excel very rapidly in this, who are having to, like, you're consuming information constantly. If you're sitting in that closed mindset, a lot of this is mindset. If you're sitting in that closed mindset, you can't get any more information in there. Or if you know everything, like a lot of marketers do, how can you fit any more information in to help and calibrate? It's a service-oriented business. You're there to serve that customer. And so, you brought a lot of really great insights there. I mean, what are some bad recommendations you hear in your profession or area of expertise?
Oh, boy. And we could spend a few hours on that. I don't even know it's a helpful question. Let me answer it this way. When I'm on a lot of these roundtables and I listen to folks and they're struggling with what to do, and I spent some time really thinking back. Okay, where have we been successful with this? And just for context, we were fortunate. This is careful with my word, but we have a facility in China. Actually, we have a facility in the same province as Wuhan. So very early on, the company had to start to think about this. And what would it mean if the Chinese offices that we have had to go remote, and we had to move work, and it set in motion sort of the whole business continuity plan, and really think about what we would do as a company. And teed us up, and it was fortunate because it exposed where we had weakness. We were able to fill it before the world really closed down, and then the whole company went virtual, literally overnight. But in doing so, we kind of went through the process that every company was going to go through. How do we communicate with employees? How are we going to message to customers? What are the customers about to go through? How can we help? And so I had our first offer up in the marketplace like on 3/14, because it was so clear. Hey, folks are now going to be holding global town halls, trying to talk to employees in many countries, and normally they would have an on-site interpreter, or they would record the U.S. session and then translate it and send it over. But no, they're going to have this big need for internal translation now because there's nobody in the office to do it. There's not even one English speaker who can do it. Hey, let's offer some free internal communications translations to folks. Not a lot, but it was what we could do to help. But we knew everybody was going to have that problem. And we probably had 7 offers in the market, just really quickly going from where we knew the stages would be. So this gets to the bad recommendations, but I think it's, what should you be doing? There's nothing on the list that I could tell you should be doing that any of us would say wasn't the modern marketing organization. Do you understand the customer and their pain? Are you matching value, matching solution against that pain from their perspective, right? Are you meeting them in the various channels that they're in? And let's face it, we know lots of folks they're living in digital long before they're talking to you. So Are you there? Are you being helpful? Is your content about you, or is it about a value add that then draws back into a solution set? I mean, there's no rocket science here. Yeah. I think we were fortunate that because we had done this transformation, everything we built was the modern marketing organization.
Yes.
And so now what COVID did is it just put all that pressure to say, where are you on those journeys? How customer centric are you really? Yeah. How digitally minded are you really? How much do you have around data and analytics and attribution and agility? Do you still do 12-month plans? Because that doesn't really work right now. And again, there's none of this is rocket science. Like I'm the first guy to talk about any of this. I won't be the last. But if you weren't doing it, or you were pseudo doing it, it just you're stuck. You're jammed. And so I guess in there's a lot of bad recommendations. I just don't think this is complicated. This stuff is simple. Understand your customer problem, match the value you deliver against that problem, meet them where they are, how they want to be served, do it responsively, and have some agility because the world moves fast.
Yeah,
That was true before COVID. It's even more true. It's not profound, but it's really hard to do, it turns out.
Completely agree with you there, man. I found it interesting. We did some webinars for some folks who were like, it was post COVID or during COVID marketing. How do you do it? And like you said, I feel like there was a line. There was a line in the sand of like pre-COVID, post-COVID. Well, post-COVID is literally just best practices of what modern marketing is, right? So if you were already doing the things you were supposed to be doing, you might have a small pivot that you needed to make to go 100% that. But like, that was the biggest advice we gave people is like, well, if you don't know how to market in this post-COVID environment that we're in, just come to us and we'll do what we've been doing because this is the right way to do it. And it sounded like we were, full of ourselves or somehow putting out some vibe that wasn't true. But the reality is exactly what you said. Modern marketing, what that was working before COVID, is exactly what you can continue doing if you were doing it properly.
Yeah, I mean, we got to the point where we were just, when people were asking us to do webinars or asking us to be an authority in this area, I mean, everyone down to like very large publishers, just knowing that we're very much in the Gen Z market and influencer space and very much so on digital trends, they all came with the question of, oh, can you speak what this post-marketing COVID world looks like? I said, sure, I can send you my proposal that I was sending people before COVID, because if you were doing that, you need to be doing the exact same things you were doing. And literally, all of a sudden, people were like looking at our pitch and our proposals, and they're like, "Oh my God, that is so profound." And I'm like, "It does it really take a pandemic for you to realize that what we've been poaching isn't a bunch of horse shit?"
So I'll tell you a funny story from years ago when I was at Citi. I was at Citi during the height of the crisis. The financial crisis, which was a fascinating time, sort of pre-post to be at Citi, and they smartly shut all marketing down during the crisis. And then there was a point at which, okay, we got to get back to doing business. And the world may not love Citi right now, but we've still got to re-engage. And there was a big, unbelievably large, campaign in the credit card business. And at the time, this will again date me. I said, hey guys, how about we do something with Foursquare? How about we let people check it, attach themselves to our account. And then when they get to Black Friday, they'll check into Best Buy. We'll partner with some of our key, merchants like Best Buy, and we'll tell them where the $5,000, HD TV is for $5 hidden in the back. And they get a free stand if they buy it with their Citi credit card or something like this. They all, of course, looked at me like I was nuts. But the really interesting thing for me was like, just give me $100,000. That's all I need. And this was literally, I'm going to lose my zeros in here, but multiples of the $100,000 of spend. And do you know where all the money was going? It was going to direct mail.
Jesus.
And I was like, and I'm like, I'm running through the math on what it would take. So you think somebody's going to see a statement stuffer. First, they're going to open their statement, not just throw it out. Then they're going to get the stuffer. Then they're going to remember it. Then they're going to remember it at 2:00 in the morning. And they're actually going to go to Best Buy. And they're actually going to go for this television. And they're actually going to think about pulling Citibank out of their credit card. I'm like, this is absurd. Why won't you give me a little bit of money? And this is where the capper is on the story. All of the decision analytics were predicated on really sophisticated models that, with great predictability to a couple tenths of a percent, would tell you put $1 into the system and 7 cents will come out. 47 cents would come out, and now it's 7 cents. And I'm making these numbers up, but you get the sense.
Antiquated models that drive.
It was such precision, and people would get fired if they predicted one thing and the results were different. Nobody wanted to take a chance on the new thing, because even though it wasn't effective, it was predictable. And it's, the old saw, nobody ever got fired, for hiring IBM. I think that's a lot of what we see is they're trying the new things, but they know how the old things produce. We can debate whether they're effective. We can debate whether or not they're as effective as they used to be, but there's predictability, and the new stuff, it takes time to learn it, and you have to do it different. And this is the second point, because you can see it right now with all these virtual events. All we have done, and humanity does this with every new thing, we shove some old thing into some new modality. So why are we all tired of Zoom calls, et cetera? Because we took the old world and we shoved it into a 3-inch camera and said, hey, let's take a 5-day event in Vegas and let's just do a 5-day event online. Right?
That'll
It's
work.
absurd.
Yes.
Right? It's absurd, right? But it is the first phase, right? Where we just take the old and we do it in the new before people start to figure out, oh no, there's a new way of doing something inside of the new. And I think that's the other thing that has caught folks, and where you're in a good position. They don't even know they were kind of doing digital, but they were still doing. Let's face it, what was the original term, right? Brochureware. They're just doing old marketing tactics, old process. When I was at TIAA, in order to help that transformation, I had to rewrite the brief. I had to teach the marketing team how to think differently. Hey, okay, this is why we have to do SEO research before you even do as part of the brief, before we write it, before we publish it.
Jesus.
And it sounds complex, but if you think about it, you got to redo the process, because the old process was predicated on a world that doesn't exist. And that's, I think, where a lot of the big disconnect is right now, because this stuff is all new, right? It's totally different planning. It's totally different information set. Different way of thinking about evergreen content and the behavior set and the way you track it. If you haven't been going through that transformation in stages over the last few years, man, I wouldn't want to be somebody who's trying to figure out how to, fix the engine on the Titanic after they hit the iceberg.
Right. It's a great analogy. And that is so prevalent right now during COVID.
Yeah, so I don't know if that answers your bad recommendation question, but I think this is where people are stuck right now, because they're desperately trying to find some magical solution, when in fact it's just the raw fundamentals, but really reconsidered in the way the buyer operates in the new world, which probably exposes how few people actually understand how their buyers operate.
Yeah, they don't know their customer journey, and it could be as simple as they never fucking ask. Shocker, you don't know.
Yes, right. Or as often happens, right, even when you get the data, the older longtime executive who knows better than you, the highest paid opinion in the room wins, kind of thing. I actually had an executive once tell me, despite all the data, that putting up an interrupting window to try to get people to sign up for online statements, it didn't matter that we had 20% opt-out rates when they did that. I don't believe it. Just stick it up there anyway. I want to drive e-statement adoption. Okay.
Yeah. Definition of putting your head in the sand.
There's a lot of poison in the corporate environment, and it's something. I mean, you touched on it earlier. People get comfortable, and then you have two sides of that. You have the leaders that are more of that boss of cracking that gavel down, and not necessarily that influential leader. And then you have employees that don't want to speak up. The culture doesn't allow anyone to say anything. So and as above, so below. The whole thing's sinking anyway, and it basically leadership is undermining the whole entire company. And if you have a private company, well, that's your own prerogative if you want to sink your company. But as this grows into larger corporate structures, it becomes a lot more messy. And a lot of this stuff is simple, but it's not always easy to execute. But it's really back to what you were saying earlier. If you can go out and identify these touch points, figure out where the pain points are within that, and answer those with solutions, I mean, there you have it. This isn't like some radical new concept, but going about that and injecting that authenticity, that humanity, and that connection into everything seems to be this new thing. It's like, whoa, and I think are we really going back to square one just to move forward? I mean, I don't think marketing in that sense has just changed. I mean, obviously we went from like radio and billboards and TV in a sense, which is still, potent in some instances, but now we're, heavy digital. I mean, the same things still apply. We're still humans. We're still on terra firma. We're still operate on the same modalities and the same feelings. And if we can tap into that, there you go.
this is the funny thing, right? I mean, if we went back and we looked at, any of the leaders that you could ever think of in marketing for the last 70 or 80 years, 100 years, you went all the way back to radio. If we go back and we look at the folks who defined, hey, what's the best practice in PR or direct mail or whatever, they all come back to the same fundamentals. You're absolutely right. The fundamentals have not changed. We're still humans. We still are more rational than we are logical. I'm more emotional than we are rational. We want to do things our way. We're unpredictable. We want to feel authentic. We want to feel connected. None of the humans have not changed, right? And theoretically, most of the marketing principles haven't either. Just how we do it and how we can do it. I mean, your authenticity point. This one fascinates me. Persistently fascinates me because it shouldn't be that difficult to be authentic. And it either shows how bad the products are or how out of touch the companies are, that they struggle with the authenticity.
Well, and if companies are being run by individuals who are out of touch with themselves, how the hell are they? How can you expect them to be in touch with anything else? If you're not in touch with yourself, you can't be in touch with what your brand is doing. And I don't know very many people who are in touch with themselves, who have any clue where they begin and where they end and where their life begins.
Well, we just went very Zen philosophical there.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
I can take it there. That's where you want to go.
Well, I got to ask, Jaime, what's next for a guy like you? It's got all this going on, is making these prognostications dating back years now that are paying off in a magnificent way. What's next?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, I'm having a lot of fun, as part of this management team leading this turnaround. We're a PE turnaround. We took a company that was really struggling. We've had record growth the last couple of years. We're actually on track for our, fingers crossed, for our best year ever.
Wow.
Nice.
Congratulations. That's fantastic.
Even exceeding our goals going into the year. And it's a tough year, right? Lots of customers suffering. We have lots of travel and hospitality customers. Millions of dollars went to zero overnight. But lots of customers in life sciences and in the gaming industry and in tech, which are obviously booming and taking advantage of this. So I'm having a lot of fun in this transformation. We, as I said, not only did all the toys get taken away from everybody else, but all the resistance did too. If you're a salesperson, you can't fight social selling right now because you have no other way of connecting with people. There are no restaurants and there's no business trip. So you better figure this thing out. So I think it's in some sense it could be it's been a frustrating digital journey for me for 25 years. In some sense, this is the greatest culmination of the moment because the world has forced it. And I've got a fantastic team. We've set all the systems up right. And really just being able to drive the results is super interesting. I guess what's next is, let's go. I'm going to finish this ride. My guess is, even though for the last 4 or 5 years, you've really seen boards just start to figure out, I need a CDO or, chief digital officer, or I need to think about revenue operations and revenue generation differently. Although that has really become code for the sales title. Yeah. Magically, all CROs are former salespeople.
Right. Convenient.
Yeah. And I think that's really getting pressed right now. Because I think the modern marketer's got to live in both the sales and the marketing world and the product world and the customer success world.
They're becoming one and the same now. And those people that are trying to fight against it are the same people, going all the way back to what you said, are still somehow maybe debating if digital should be their focus, right? It's like, if you don't understand that those two are merging, you are probably a good decade behind.
Yeah, it is where I think marketing in general, particularly folks who grew up in digital marketing, because it's the same fights. I mean, the fight we had over whether the web mattered, then went to whether email matters, then to social, then to video, soon it'll be about AR and VR, and it's already happening on, voice search and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So I think if you've been in a lucky enough position to sort of have grown up with those fights, you're now in such a better position because digital, it's all data, it's all customer centric. It's all agile. It's all fast. That just is the world we live in. Till you said it earlier, if you're not learning every day and pivoting, you're behind. And that's hard. That's not a natural human state, to pivot and adapt. Evolution happens over millions of years, not millions of minutes, so to speak. So it's a fascinating time. But look, I think there's going to be so much opportunity after this. There's a lot of I think boards now. There's not a board that doesn't get it.
Yes.
Who's leading it? Because you just got an abject test as to whether or not the billions of dollars or millions of dollars that you've spent in your transformation efforts over the last few years were effective. Because we're never going back, right? There's never not going to be online grocery shopping or some of these other things.
Yeah, the resiliency that you're going to see here in the next, I speculate, 12 to 15 months. I'd say we'll probably be in this for another 3-4 months, but as this continues to dive off and the numbers look better than they do right now, you're going to see the resiliency of young entrepreneurs that come in, and for every 5 restaurants that were closed, there's going to be 6 that open. And it's an odd way to be optimistic, but those that really get it and are really willing to prioritize the 20% instead of the 80% that so many are still focused on are going to win, and they're going to win hard.
Look, forest fires serve a very important function in in nature, right? They clean out the old and they create the space for new growth. Every 5 or 10 years, we're going to have one of these in business, and it helps clear the space for the new. I hate to think about it that way, but it is true.
No, it is true. Hey, Jaime, where's the best place online for our listeners to connect in with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn's probably the best place. I've got a Twitter account that I sort of am episodically active on, just J Punishill. Twitter is probably the easiest place to find me. And there's only 4 Punishills in the world since I made the name up. It was my first marketing move. So you could easily find me on LinkedIn's probably the easiest way.
Well, Jaime, we want to sincerely thank you for coming on the Phame Influence podcast. Your insights, your authenticity, and your innovation in marketing it's just been a pleasure. I want to really thank you so much for coming on and spending the time.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation. Very happy to come back and think about what comes next anytime you guys want.
Thanks so much, Jaime. We beyond appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, gentlemen.
That concludes another episode of the Phame Influence podcast. Catch us next time.